I am reading passages from Maureen Callahan's Ask Not, The Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed, the 400-page tome that was published by Little Brown and Company in July of 2024. This passage deals with MaryJo Kopechne, who was left by Ted Kennedy to drown or suffocate in 3 feet of Pucha Pond at Chappaquiddick, Martha's Vineyard, 1969. Page 116. Ted Kennedy gave MaryJo's parents no details. They didn't know that Ted had been driving. They didn't know he had an expired license, had been drinking heavily, and had pitched his car, their daughter inside, into the shallow waters of Pucha Pond 10 hours before. They didn't know that he had emerged from the water and walked over a mile, passing by several houses, at least one with the lights on, never looking for help, or that he had passed the local firehouse, or that he had bypassed payphones and never called the police or 911. Her parents didn't know that the very next morning members of his staff could still smell alcohol on Ted's breath, or that their daughter had been alive for hours, tossed upon impact into the back of the car, contorting herself upside down in the rear footwell, clutching at the back seat and craning her neck to breathe through a small air pocket. They didn't know that John Farrer, the diver who pulled her body out of the car, quickly determined that she had probably lived for at least an hour after the crash, and that had Ted gotten help, MaryJo could have been saved, or that later, Farrer would describe MaryJo as having been alone in the dark water, rebreathing her own air, the oxygen turning to carbon dioxide, her emotional trauma overwhelming. MaryJo, even in death, was immaculate. She was found in her dark blue pants and long-sleeved white shirt, her jewelry, a ring and 2 gold bracelets intact. Only her chain-link belt came apart as Farrer pulled her body from the car, her eyes and mouth open, her teeth clenched. Page 130. At the inquest, John Farrer, the diver who recovered MaryJo's body the next afternoon, testified that MaryJo had not drowned but had suffocated to death. He said she had been alive for at least an hour in the water, maybe longer. Page 116 continued. Farrer would later describe that last hour of MaryJo's life in unpitying detail. "Try putting a plastic bag over your head and breathing," he said. "Then try to imagine that bag being held over your head by a 300-pound wrestler and think of having to struggle to get out of that situation knowing you might be breathing your last. The anxiety that sets in is just unbelievable." Gwen and Joe Kopechne didn't know that MaryJo waited in agony for help that never came. And why wouldn't first responders be on the scene? Who would leave a young woman to die that way? Ted Kennedy would. After leaving the scene, the married senator went back to his hotel room in Edgartown, where he made 17 long-distance phone calls to friends, advisors, his brother-in-law Steve Smith, known as the Kennedy family fixer, and Helga Wagner, whom friends described as the love of Ted's life. Around 2:30 in the morning, Ted complained to the front desk about guests in a nearby room who were having a party. The noise, he said, was disturbing his sleep.
No one to talk with, all by myself. No one to walk with, but I'm happy on the shelf. Ain't misbehaving, saving my love for you, for you, for you, for you. I know for certain the one I love. I'm through with flirting, it's you that I'm thinking of. Ain't misbehaving, saving my love for you.
Page 115. While he stood behind Police Chief Jim Arena's desk, he struggled to formally identify the young woman whom he had left in his car the night before, a car he had left upside down in 3 feet of water after careening off a bridge. Her name was MaryJo. Ted could pronounce her last name, kind of, but he didn't know how to spell Kopechne. Kopechne. So Ted, in writing out his statement, just left that part blank. It wasn't important really. Ted knew that some other police officer or administrative clerk would figure it out and fill it in. He had one other, equally pressing question for Chief Arena. Would he go back down to the pond? Ted wanted to be sure that his black Chevy got out and cleared okay. Page 127. He tried, he said. The water only came up to his waist, and he said he dove again and again. I was doing everything that I possibly could to get the girl out of the car, Ted said. Page 130. Was there any particular reason, Prosecutor Edmund Dennis asked Ted, why you did not call either the police or the fire department? Well, Ted testified, I intended to call for assistance and report the accident to police within a few short moments of going back into the car. Did something transpire to prevent this? Ted dodged the question. Instead, he became most talkative about his own physical pain, self-pity, fear, and a childlike belief that the whole problem, MaryJo's death and his responsibility for it, would just go away. He was afraid, he said, to call MaryJo's mother. I just couldn't gain the strength within me, the moral strength, to call Mrs. Kopechne at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell her that her daughter was dead. Instead, he called Helga Wagner. Then he went back to his room at the inn, and despite being seen by multiple witnesses at breakfast the next morning, freshly showered and shaved, neatly dressed, composed and with a healthy appetite, Ted insisted he had not slept the night before, tossing and turning and pacing, overwhelmed by the tragedy and loss of a very devoted friend, whose last name he was unsure of, and whom he had left at the bottom of a pond.
I don't stay out late, no place to go. I'm home about 8, just me and my radio. Ain't misbehaving, saving all my love for